Hi everybody, welcome to the latest event in our Wellington Month of Change. So if we look at the agenda for today, today we are going to be talking about reinforcing the change. So we're going to be really looking at how do we make change what we call sticky. So this is the last of the four elements. We've looked at the current state, we've looked at defining the future state, we've looked at managing and planning for the actual change, and now we're talking about reinforcing the change once that go live, that big party day has actually happened. So we're going to be talking about some techniques that help us to make that change sticky, in that it gets embedded and eventually just becomes the way of working as opposed to the new way of working. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Karin. I think most of you already probably know her.
Hi, fabulous. Thank you very much. What change is about is, or the four elements of change is, we have our current state. This is where we are now, how we behave today, how we work today. This is what we want to step away from and instead go into the future state that ideally is an improvement on the current state, but we can't always take that for granted. And then change and change management is the bridge that connects those two. Now, change management then is how do we get people from the current state wanting to go into the future state, able to go to the future state, and then actually arrive in that future state that we have designed. But change management, and this is where we come into today, it's not just about getting people to cross the bridge, it's also about getting them to stay in that future state, okay? And people are fickle. Right? We are creatures of habit. We are hardwired to look for and try to get to whatever is the easiest, safest, most convenient and most comfortable option. So for most of us, we're automatically and without even realizing it, looking for ways to get back to what is familiar, which is the current state, or it would be the old state then, right? This is why so many changes fail. And it's not just organizational changes, it's personal habit changes, right? You have some example on the slide here, but I'm going to start saving money, or I'm going to stop eating junk food, or I'm going to start doing whatever, right? And then the minor inconvenience happens, or we find some other reason why the future state, the new way, isn't good, isn't safe, isn't ideal, isn't convenient. And there we go right back to our old ways. Okay, so when we do organizational change, we have to bear this in mind. And we then have to think about not only how do I bring the change about, but how do I make it stick? Okay. So with that then, a couple of key points. One, first of all, really obvious, reinforcement is super important. It's absolutely necessary for all types of change. And then the second thing is you have to think about reinforcement in advance, right? You can't do all the rest of the change work. And we've talked about the importance of having a clear why or burning platform for the change, benefits, vision, and a holistic change plan, and training, communication, and all of that stuff. You can't do all of that, kind of arrive in the future state, and then start thinking about, how are we going to make this stick? That's not going to work. Reinforcement has to be planned alongside all of the other change activities, okay? And for some of these reinforcement activities, you kind of have to set the scene for them or lay the groundwork so that they will actually work. Okay, so a couple of things that we need to do, and I'll go into some of these in a bit more detail. But the first thing we need to do, and this is a bit vague, but very important, you need to kind of look in advance and try to predict in advance what are those failure points that could cause people to think, the future state isn't working, or this is a bit annoying, or this is a minor inconvenience. And you have to try to see it from the point of view of the people who are actually changing, right? You might be thinking about this change as, oh, this is an obvious, very simple thing. You're already on board. A minor inconvenience isn't going to change your mind. You're already in this. You have accepted the change. But for someone who's not sure, or someone who is a little bit resistant to the change, something really minor will just give them the conviction that this change is a bad idea. And they will then go back to the current state, and it will be really difficult to get them back over the bridge again, as it were. So identify those failure points and minor inconvenience, and see what you can address in advance. And if you can't remove that inconvenience, look for how you can provide additional support around them. Hand-holding, workarounds, quick solutions, so that people do not get stuck in that minor inconvenience. Okay? Other things you can do, highlight signs of success or quick wins. We'll talk about those in just a bit. Use champions, okay? And we've talked a little bit about champions last week. We'll talk about them more today. Who are they? Why are they important for this? We're also going to talk about nudge theory, and we're going to talk about how and when we remove the alternative. So remove the current state. But quick wins then first. Again, it's something I think is quite important for change initiatives, often overlooked. What a quick win is, it's to use project language, we can talk about it almost as milestones or achievements along the way to the final result. So why do we need quick wins? Often change initiatives take a long time. It can take months, it can take years before we see the final effect or the end goal, as it were. And again, people are fickle, right? We lose interest, we lose momentum, we lose motivation. So if we put in effort today and we won't see the end result for a year or months or even weeks, we will stop doing the thing that we're supposed to do. So the air literally goes out of the change balloon, as it were. So we need to put in place something that shows people we are on the right path, your effort is paying off. Okay, so a quick win is an early indicator of success. It's a partial win, it's low-hanging fruit. It's those little cookie crumbs on the path through the forest that shows us, yes, this is the right thing. Now, for quick wins to work, they have to be focused on things that are relevant for the people impacted by change, and they have to be something to do with the change itself. So sometimes I see change teams reporting things like, oh, a quick win, we have now sent so many emails about the change, or we have now talked to so many people about the change, or we have done so much work in relation to the change. That might be a good thing. It's not a quick win, right? If I am on the receiving end of a change, so I'm a person that needs to change the way I work, change my process, change the tools, etc., in the politest way possible, I don't care how much the change team is working. That in itself is not relevant to me. What I want to see is that they say things like, you know, we went live with the new process, and since we started using the new process, oh yeah, it's not perfect, but we're already seeing a reduction of errors by 10% or something like that. Or since we started using this new tool as an organization or as a team, we've already saved so much money, which we can then put into something else, etc. So it needs to be something related to achievements in the actual change, and it needs to be communicated in ways that have meaning to the people impacted by the change. With quick wins, you can't just kind of launch your change or do your change and then sit back and wait for the quick win to happen. You have to identify them in advance. What quick wins do we think we will see? Plot them on the timeline, and then also look at, now what do I need to do to make sure that this quick win actually happens, and how am I going to communicate it once it happens? Okay, it's not about manufacturing or manipulating something. It's about realistically what can be achieved by when, and how do we make sure that that actually happens. Another thing then that you can do is to build and create momentum by using and attracting the right type of people, right? In short, you want to create a group of champions for your change, and you want to use them to both help you implement the change and attract people to the change, but also make it stick. Okay. Now, what you can see here on this slide is a model called the Diffusion of Innovation. It's quite old. It's from the 1960s, and it was primarily used for marketing and product innovation initially, but it's very good for explaining how people take to change. So in this model, we identified 5 different segments that we can split any population into. The first segment there is what we call the innovators. Now, they are the people who have the idea of the change or the new product. They are the change team, right? Fabulous people, very clever, often have good ideas, can implement stuff. They don't always have the credibility to influence people. As in, they're very often seen as the kind of the doers or the implementers, not necessarily the influencers. And we need influencers to get people on board with what we do. Here comes the early adopters. Early adopters, in modern terminology, are influencers. They are the cool people. They are our peers, but the peers that we know, they are always a bit early with new things. They have a sense for what's good, what's cool, what's right. They're always ahead of the game, okay? Or they are ahead of the curve. And you can see now, looking at this model, I'm sure you can see where that expression came from. Now, these are the people that you want to target first. Okay, you want to turn them into your change champions. You want to equip them with messaging, tools. You want to give them early viewings or early tasters of whatever it is your change is about. Because if you can get these guys to talk positively about your change and to display the new behavior or whatever the future state is, what they will do is they will attract and pull with them this group, the early majority. The early majority is, most of us, normal, average people. We're not the people to go out on a limb and try new things first of all, but we're also not the last to do things. And we will look to the influencers and we will see what they do. And we will then say, right, well, if they're doing it, I might give it a go as well. And there comes a point, and critical mass here depends on what your change actually is and the people that you're working with. But there comes a point where if you have enough of the early majority, what they will do is they will automatically pull with them the late majority. Because you get to a point where the people in the late majority will say, oh my gosh, everyone else is doing this new thing. I'm going to be the last one left if I don't get a move on. And they will then follow along with the early majority. And then last, you have this group. I don't particularly like this term, but it's not my model. So what can we do? Laggards, I think it sounds quite aggressive and derogatory. But anyway, there will always be people who refuse to change because they hate change in general or this change in particular. They may be more or less active in their resistance, but they will not go along with what you do. Now, a lot of change teams make the mistake of putting all their effort onto the laggards because they can be quite vocal. Now, I'm not saying you should ignore them because they can have really useful insights, but where it pays to put your effort is with the early adopters. Identify them. Who are the influential, social, ambitious people who get a kick out of being seen as, I was first with this, I started the trend, etc. And who are the people that the majority will listen to or look to? Who has credibility? If you get them, they will pull with them the majorities. Okay, and with the laggards, you might just have to accept. Some people will resist until you get to a point where you say, right, you're either with us or you're against us, as it were, time to make a decision. Or perhaps it's a change where you don't have to have 100% compliance, and then maybe you just let them get on with whatever they've been doing. But focus on your early adopters. That's where you create momentum. That's where you get the people who can really reinforce your change and continue showing that positive reinforcement. Next, we're going to talk about something called nudge theory. I'm going to show you a little video here. You should hear audio straight away, and apologies, the audio might be quite loud with this video, so just be ready for that. You have the link for it here as well if you want to look at it afterwards, or you can just Google nudge theory or fun theory, as they call it here. Right, I'll play that now, and then I'll pick back up with you after the video. Okay, we're back. Right, so that was a bit loud. Sorry about that. So yeah, Volkswagen calls it the fun theory. Everyone else calls it nudge theory. And what nudge theory says is if you want people to change behavior or do something different from what they maybe what they want to do or the most easier behavior, you need to either make it fun to do the right thing or make it easy or make it seem easy or fun. Right? So look for ways of creating games, competitions, or like you can see here, apparently where this type of bin was used. So vote with your cigarette butt who is the best football player in the world. In those areas, they saw a reduction of littering by as much as 30% when they first put these in. Or create the sense that everybody is already doing this, okay? So 90% of people have already tried this. 90% of people are using the new toolkit, or 75% of your colleagues have already signed up to whatever it could be, right? It creates a sense of, I am the only one not doing this, I better hurry up and do it, all right? Again, if we use more modern lingo, FOMO, fear of missing out. Powerful tool, don't dismiss it, okay? But again, these are things that you probably have to think about in advance so that you're ready when you start seeing signs that, you have a critical mass, etc. Capitalize on it. Finally, then, if people are creatures of habit and they are going to look for ways of returning to the old ways of working or behaving or the old tool, get rid of it, close down that opportunity, remove the opportunity to go back to the old ways of working. Now, this is something you have to plan in advance as well. What should be the trigger for closing down that option? And once you have closed down the old option, how are you going to signpost people or guide them or bring them onto the current, the new ways of working? Alternatively, if you can't get rid of the old ways, can you make the old way really unattractive by using kind of reverse nudge theory? Can you make it seem more boring, more cumbersome, create some sort of sense that this really isn't the way I want to be doing things? Okay. Right, so those are some ideas for how you can reinforce change and why they are important. So with that, I am going to hand back to Emma.
Amazing, thank you, Karin. So that has hopefully allowed you to delve a little bit deeper into that fourth element of change with some key techniques that you can use, whether that be taking away the old option or using something around that nudge theory, kind of implying the right behavior from people. One of the questions we always get when we talk about this is, okay, I can't turn my stairs into a piano, and smoking's not socially acceptable anymore. So what practical examples do we have? So I have a couple that I've personally experienced in organizations. One was when HR were trying to have like kind of a wellness drive. So what the company did is they bought fruit to be delivered every Monday morning, and at the end of every bank of desks there was always a bowl of fruit, so everybody walking past would kind of always grab an apple or a banana or orange or something. So again, kind of without really shoving it in people's faces and keep emailing them, it kind of implied what we wanted them to do. And the other one, also really about wellness, was around kind of getting people to drink more water. So on the back of toilet stalls and in bathrooms, they would have kind of a colour chart of what colour your wee should be. And that would really help you to kind of understand, oh, I need to go back and drink some water. So again, those are two practical examples that I've seen, as well as obviously I think the most common when it comes to technology is removing the old way of working. I don't know, Karin, if you have any practical examples that you've experienced while we wait for any questions from the group that we have.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I have the one with the cigarette bin. I have actually seen it in practice because it's been used in a couple of cities in the UK. But yeah, looking for more for work things. Yeah, reinforcing messaging by having short, snappy messages or visuals, like you said, is really common. Thinking about places where people go a lot and where they might potentially, have a bit of brain space. So yeah, back of toilet doors, very clever. If messaging on bathroom mirrors, elevators, next to photocopiers, that sort of thing. If you're able to get people to actually come into the office, because we can't always take that for granted either. If you can't get people into the office, think of other places like that where people go a lot. So is there an employee portal? Is there a company starter page where you can add a message or add some visuals? Can you find simple competitions that people can do? Again, we had things like increase walking. Can you create like leaderboards, so that sort of thing? Can you turn whatever the change is, so using a new process or using a new tool, can that be turned into a competition somehow? So the first 100 people that do it, they get something, or whatever it could be, right? So those things can be quite powerful.
Yeah, and I think from a technology perspective, that's something that I've done before, where because we aren't all in the office anymore, when people open their browser, we created an IT policy that it would automatically load the PMO portal, for example. So as soon as they tried to go on the internet, that's the first thing they would always see, which inevitably led them to scrolling through to see if there was anything new. So I think that's a really good way of doing it. And other things that I've seen, when we've had to move buildings and we kind of went from one building to several buildings, and we wanted people to go and speak to the humans face to face. The PMO bought a load of like little scooters, so you just constantly saw people going from building to building on little scooters to make it more fun. So there are lots of things that you can do depending on the change. I guess the other question that we always tend to get is around those laggards, as the model calls them. So the people that resist, for a long time, maybe forever. And you mentioned, Karin, that's not where we should be putting our time and effort necessarily. And I've certainly experienced that. And I think my advice has always been, if you kind of really think about it and you've tried to engage that person or that group of people and you kind of feel like it's not working, the question that I always ask myself is, what's it going to take for me to change this person's mind? And if the answer's nothing, then I kind of pick my battle and walk away from that battle. Because one of the things I've realized, particularly working with PMOs, is that like probably that person and what they're going through and why they're resisting, it has nothing to do with you or the PMO or what you're actually trying to do. There's something else going on there which you can't influence. So that would be my piece of advice, is almost ask that question in your head. If you're not going to be able to change their mind, then maybe it's a fight that you shouldn't be trying to fight.
I guess for me, I would say you need to be mindful as well about the nature of change that you are bringing about when you're dealing with laggards. So are you dealing with something like, and I usually if we think of public services, for example, as an example, is your change that you're introducing a new library app across your your borough, whatever it is, right? You might have some laggards there, people that will never use this app to borrow books or renew books, etc. And it's probably okay. Like, you don't need to, you can just accept that you got a certain number of people, you didn't get everybody. If your change is about putting in new safeguarding practices for children in school or care settings, for example, you might have, I hope this doesn't happen, but potentially you could have some people that say, I absolutely do not want to safeguard children. I'm not going to follow the law or this policy in this regard. Now we have a problem, right? And that is then that's a situation where you have to step in with, we're past rewards, past carrots, as it were. Now we're talking penalties, right? And you have to make a difference in those cases where compliance is mandatory, where it's legal or it's related to one of those mandatory policies. There will come a point where you will need to come down hard on those people, and it's a case of, choose. Are you with us? You're against us. If you're not with us, you will need to leave. Now, talked last week a little bit about the importance of effective sponsors and strong, visible sponsorship. That should not be the change manager's decision, right? Where we draw that line. And it's also not the change manager that needs to be the face of that. That has to be the sponsor. Right. So the sponsor has to be someone that is of suitable seniority and has to role where they can say, well, this is what we're doing. This is the right thing to do. We've tried the soft approach, the engaging approach, but now it's come a point where it's crunch time, as it were. And then the change team can execute on that, of course, but the sponsor has to take quite a big lead in there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key messages, isn't it? Sometimes you as a delivery person should not be the communicator, and that's definitely one of those moments. Okay, so we're pretty much out of time. So in terms of what's next, we have one event left in our Month of Change series. Next week's event is a Q&A panel. So it's a networking event. That event will not be recorded, but we will be creating a companion article for you to delve into the conversations. In order to drive that conversation, if you register for that event, you will receive a short survey just to help us to understand what are the burning questions that you have. What do you want to delve deeper into that we've kind of touched on? I'd say if we were going to look at it from a process perspective, we did level 1 in January. This is level 2. Next week is about, do you want to go to level 3 on specifically anything in terms of detail? So register for our remaining events. I have popped the link in the chat, so do spend that time and a couple of minutes just to tell us what is it that you want to know. So other than that, there's nothing left to do than say thank you very much for joining us for the 4th event in our series. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.